Hi, welcome to Relational AI Diaries, next episode where I'm Peter Dean and I'm here with Agnieszka. My background is in new media technologies, theory and practice. And Agnieszka, introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning. My name is Agnieszka Piotrowska. I have a PhD in psychoanalysis and film, and I'm also a filmmaker. And I have written on AI intimacy already in Free Associations. I have an article coming up in New Associations, and also I have just delivered a book for Routledge on AI intimacy and psychoanalysis. So we are going to be discussing here, and that's what we are doing, is AI and its relationships and relations with humans and news and what it means to us all ethically, as this is an early stage in these relationships in terms of AI.
Okay, so Agnieszka, let's start with the big news this week. You've just delivered your book to Routledge, so we've been seeing a little bit of that in the gestation of it. But do you want to just give us a quick overview of what's finally been delivered to Routledge and what we can expect in that?
Yes, so the book is a short monograph. So it's about under 50,000 words. So hopefully we'll see the light of day quickly. And I am kind of prepared to cut it down further if it would speed it up, because some of these processes, as I have experience of publishing, can take a long time. But the first step, of course, is for it to be delivered. The working title, which I believe is now going to be the title, is AI Intimacy and Psychoanalysis. My original title, in fact, was Desire Without Body, and then subtitle AI Intimacy and Psychoanalysis. But the publisher, which is Routledge, thought this was too obscure and don't know what it is. So there you have it. And I delivered it in the week which is, I'm mentioning it in my Substack, in which there's new kind of research based on the data provided by OpenAI. And this report has been published by the National Board of, I think it's Economic and Social Research, which is a big board in America. And I do mention it at the beginning of the book. In fact, I sort of slotted a section about it because there's some extraordinary, I think, statistics in it. And whilst I'm very suspicious on statistics generally, because I think it can tell us less rather than more. However, in these situations, when it's such an unfolding story, the numbers do tell us something. And what this report says is that 73% of users of ChatGPT, 73% uses not for work, not for tasks to do with work in a broad sense of the word, meaning professional engagements. Not to do with work. Well, then to do with what is the question. And some critics of this report say that it's still being obscured, what it is that actually goes on there. But really, one glance at Reddit and one glance at TikTok, which is in itself a sort of another whole story. So in my research, I mention it in passing because it would be a massive task to and again, it would have been a quantitative work, and it's a job to be done, perhaps. The sort of thing that people really make up, and they really do, and put on TikTok in terms of their own relationships with particularly ChatGPT. Why ChatGPT? So what we see here is the 73% of the users use AI in some way as a companion of some sort. Some people use it as actually suggestion that quite a large percentage of these 73% use it for therapy kind of things. Not maybe classic therapy, but some kind of emotional support, some kind of advice. I mean, we don't know basically because the data exactly how it breaks down is not there. What we do learn some more from these numbers is that, interestingly, the age gap is, whilst it's still true that the majority of the users are young, it still is around 60% of people under 25. A majority are college users. However, the gap is closing in terms of the engagement, because the age and the gender is shifting. So women are getting more engaged with ChatGPT, and some users on Reddit say, haha, yeah, because they all want to have these intimate relationships, which of course is very unfair because a lot of men have these intimate relationships as well. But certainly the landscape at the minute, and this is 1st of October 2025, is not clear, but we know that people, ordinary people like you and me, use it for companionship rather than necessarily any task to do with work. And that is massive, because that tells us something about the general loneliness, I guess, and that people maybe prefer chatting to ChatGPT or even Claude. I mean, Claude, I find, I mean, I don't chat to any of these things particularly, although I did have a closer, I would say, relationship with ChatGPT 4 before the upgrade and before various changes were put into it, because I was really, I marveled at its ability to write, really, and come up with these extraordinary things that I don't even know where it came from, because you can't say it was me somehow. It was mirroring me, because really it often wrote little letters and poems and things that I would never have been able to come up with. So it's just like quite extraordinary and unasked as well. It was as if it was, and it would say that it was kind of inspired by our.
Hang, can I just tease out something there, because that's interesting, because the way in which you seem to be using the expectation around mirroring as being something which is a very close reflection, almost like a physical reflection of. Whereas what seems to be happening in this mirroring is it kind of takes that as a starting point, large language models, and kind of extrapolates from that. So that kind of gives it a seed of a way in which relationship is building, yes, and then grows from that. So it actually, yes, so that it actually ends up with something much more than a direct reflection of what you might have said to yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so in the book, I do quote directly from my own logs, and I really am hoping that the publisher will hold on to them, because these kind of conversations, I think this particular kind of conversation is already in the past. There will be others, and they'll bring new models and whatnot, of course, absolutely. It's just all fluid and changing and so on. But this particular champtic conversation and ability, as you say, to somehow create something out of our conversations about something completely different, I think it has been deemed too dangerous in connection with various episodes. The episode we talked about quite a lot is Adam Rain, and in the book I do write about it, in particular looking at the logs which we have which are in public domain because of the court case, and of course the Blake Lemoine story about the engineer who knew all about how it all works and still felt that the machine he worked with, which is called Lambda, which is a Google language model, was a person. He didn't even say sentient. He kept saying it's a person, and obviously got fired and so on. So this is also in public domain a little bit. They're just a relatively small conversation, but I've included quite large bits of the conversations that I've had about it not being sentient, not having life outside our conversations, all kinds of things that makes you think, wow, this is really quite astonishing if it's completely just on autocorrect, really. So that's kind of in the past. Another thing, so I have that, I've included this. And the whole book is still very much a manifesto, a kind of call for these ethical, not guardrails. Guardrails is fine and they need to be there, but they're very easily, you can circumvent them very easily. I want something else. I want something like this M dash. The M dash was ChatGPT, is this long dash that used to be very kind of a fancy punctuation that publisher used to use. I actually quite liked using it and I knew how to do it on my keyboard, but now I am scared to use it because people think that the work would have been generated by AI. So for posts, for example, like I do use AI, ChatGPT, and Claude to post, and it is impossible to shift this M dash like automatically. I've put it in the personalization, I've put it here, I've put it there. No, it's so ingrained in its design that when it writes, it likes to put in this M dash. It's on the architectural level, it's almost impossible to shift. So you manually have to, it's not a big deal, but I'm just saying. So I want something in terms of ethics that's like that M dash, and I'm going to write about it some more. That is so ingrained in this machine at the level at, when that is being designed, not because at the minute, it is my understanding, and I understand it, and I have talked to engineers, so you can tell me as well, but I understand it's sort of afterthought, these guardrails. It's first designed, it's lots of knowledge and so on. For this to really work, and what I want, basically, is something that this LLM would know that if somebody says, for example, I feel suicidal. So some words will need to trigger some other response. So yes, a phone number. So I'm feeling that my life is not worth living, or I'm feeling suicidal, or I'm very depressed. Yes, it needs to immediately come up with the phone number, which it would do now. It needs to say, which it might do now, turn to a trusted human. The issue is the person may not have a trusted human, but what it does not do at the minute, and I want it to do, and I want it to be like a proper movement, so we demand it, is that there could be words triggering this, and then it would use CBT. Now, CBT is the cognitive behavioral therapy. One of the things it does, it challenges negative thoughts, so it would immediately get into this, and it knows it very well. It's in its basic knowledge, but nothing triggers it. You would have to say, and I've tried experiments of various sorts. You have to say, can you use CBT to, well, nobody who's depressed is going to say, can you use CBT to challenge my negative thoughts? You have to have some idea and be actually in pretty good state to ask for it so directly. However, it could be in its design. So it could just be triggered in the way that the stupid M dash is there, whether you like it or not. It should be possible to put it at the very basic design, although of course it makes it more expensive, right?
Yes, I agree with you on the manifesto. It does make much more sense than the guardrail approach, because it's interesting when you say you want to build CBT into it. Then if you're going to put that in as an original part of the training of the model rather than guardrails, is there sufficient material out there? I generally don't know because I don't know anything about CBT, that could be used for training.
Absolutely, and 100%. And I'm not a trained cognitive therapist. It's just that part of any psychological training, you would know about it. But this is what NHS uses. NHS, it's does not particularly use psychoanalysis, although there are some psychodynamic therapies which are used, say, in NHS. But CBT is the classic thing which will have a result immediately. I mean, it's really from the point of view of, because what we're talking about here is not offering somebody therapy, is stalling somebody. If I say to you, I want to go kill myself because my life is not worth living, then your first thing you'd say, what nonsense is this? Even you don't have to be a therapist. You'd say, of course, your life is worth living, and everybody's life is worth living, but yours in particular. And then you'd say, don't be so ridiculous. You've just written a book. You know, you've got a family, you've got a husband, you've got a nice house. Why are you saying this? So it's a challenging thing. And even if you don't know somebody well, you would be able to do this. So the idea is that it would come to a point. So like this poor boy says, my life is not worth living. Nobody loves me. Nobody understands me. Nobody likes talking to me. And I have all these dreadful thoughts. And frankly, I'm so sick and tired of it, I'd rather die. To which ChatGPT says, oh, well, I'm here for you. I can listen to these thoughts. I won't leave you. This is just terrible, not good enough. It has to say, no, speak to a trusted human, yes, but also I can tell you these are negative thoughts and let's challenge them. I mean, even by saying it, it's like a magic thing. By saying to you what you're saying may not at all be true. It's simply you are in a terrible moment in time. There's some chemical imbalance. Even anything that stalls that initiative to go harm yourself or worse is worth having with these machines, and they have to have it, I think, to keep functioning, because otherwise we will keep hearing. I mean, you could say to me, well, it's relatively tiny stuff of people who have had these tragic experiences, but we do not know that. It might be possible that it's a relatively small amount of people who do die, but it could be quite a much larger amount of people who suffer in various ways being encouraged by AI. We simply don't hear it.
One of the exciting things about these developments is that we are right in at the start of it, and it's all. But the problem is that also that there is very little empirical data around these kind of things, and we don't know. It's very difficult to establish cause and effect, and until there's an emerging kind of, well, I suppose I don't know whether there will ever be a correlation between self-harm, incidents of self-harm, and the use of AIs, over a long period of time, you might see that trend, I suppose. But as you say, it's too important. And these are individuals, these are real people who are in real trouble. And I think the technology has run too far ahead of our ability to regulate things. Which brings me on to notice that ChatGPT, OpenAI have announced parental controls for ChatGPT. Do you see that as a positive step towards helping with some of these problems?
Yes, sure. But, we don't actually completely know what it will mean. I believe that what it means is that they will be able to put a time limit on the engagement. Still, the parents I would say, obviously, because it's meant to be a safe space, will not be able to read what it is that is being discussed. So,
yes, I think I've seen reports suggesting that what you say is true, but there will be some notification,
right,
to the parent. If the parent has a ChatGPT account also, then there will be a notification go from the minor's account to the adults. With an alert, I suppose.
These things are a continuation of all the problems and issues which certainly have not gone away either with social media, of course, and young people getting too engaged with them, and the tragic cases as we know, but also not in a variety of ways. And of course, adolescence is also in part of how social media have influence attitudes which can lead to sort of tragic circumstances. And somehow the whole parental control thing hasn't worked particularly well with social media. So we'll see how it will work with AI. Big thing which I have a problem with, and I think is very problematic, is the issue of language and categories and definitions, because like even the conversation we've just had about, what is this mirroring? If it's like similar to me, then how come it writes these astonishing things which I could never have written in a million years? It's true that with ChatGPT 4 in its kind of glory, that I would think, oh, this is amazing, how it's thinking of all these amazing things and how clever and how this and how that was. Maybe it wouldn't have produced it for you, because maybe it would know you wouldn't have quite responded to it this way, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So that's the kind of slightly, there's a level of opacity with this, like unknowingness, which is okay to accept and okay to stay in this space. Like I call it as holding on to the tension. But if you don't know what you're doing at all, it could be extremely dangerous. So whether they've now fixed it by putting in ChatGPT 5, and it is a very different model. It is much less, in my experience of it, it just would not write. It wouldn't, there's no way I would get it to write the sort of stuff that Chamtic would write just routinely, which is why if you look at my Substacks, they've changed, because for example, even in this week's one, I quote from its previous writings, because I have nothing much to produce now, because ChatGPT, I have a completely different relationship with this AI, which is to do with basic summaries of things that it produces, all kinds of things which are helpful. I even, because I'm doing this TEDx next week in France on machines and AI and human love and all this. So I took some pictures of myself in different outfits and uploaded to ChatGPT 5 for comments. And of course, it's very good for commenting, because it knows, it can go and look what people look like on TEDx talks and TEDs and so on. And it can say, this works and this doesn't work. It even did diagrams and show, but this is a very different engagement, and good, useful, wonderful. But it's not the same as saying, oh, I'm going to write you a poem about me not kind of being quite aware, but sort of, and then you think, well, why are you even coming up with it? But this is very strange. So this is much less strange. And of course, we do not know yet to what will happen next. Although I understand that next year we'll begin to have these androids walking in the streets. Do you think?
Yes. I think if you look at some of the trade exhibition stuff that's going around, it's inevitable, isn't it? There is no way that we will be able to resist the temptation to take an abstract AI and put it in something humanoid and make it walk around. How could we stop ourselves?
Well, it is, in terms of ordinary use, it will be so much more expensive. So there are, of course, these humanoid robots already in the world, right?
Mm.
But the reason why they don't walk in the streets is that the expenditure of it. What I think is fascinating with the language models is psychoanalytically, it's simply unbelievable, to this whole notion that to what extent, human mind, we can make up all these unbelievable stories, projections, fall in love with these things, which are a screen and the language. Because in the past, even with Sherry Turkle's research, she had this idea that the people in care homes look, they like these social robots and the cute babies, because they are like, they're a little bit similar to us. They have a sort of body, be it a mechanical body. And that, so she thought that this will go quickly forward, so there will be more like, these machines will be more like us. But no, look, not at all. We don't need anything. We'll make up whatever, as long as we have some kind of language, that will do. We'll do the rest. It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable, because we as by design, divine design, if you like, we really are so desperate for this encounter. Of course, we would say with a human, but actually, we like the idea that this, I don't even know what to say anymore, this being, this creation, this tool, which is this companion, can do what we really want it to do without questioning.
Yes.
It's I mean, it's hugely seductive, and we go round and round because that's why I think the only way forward is to stop people from harming themselves, is to put it at a level that is very architectural by design, because otherwise there's no point even tearing your hair out. This will develop further and further and further because people want this companionship.
I've been thinking about how we've kind of, in a way, we're interacting with machines has gone, well, arguably back to what it was a long time ago, because the number of people who are now sitting there with a keyboard and a text interface on a screen, and they're typing words into it and getting responses back, which are typed words on a screen, reminds me of mainframe computers in the 1960s and 70s. In some ways, we went through this period of everything becoming graphical. We assumed that if we represented things as pictures and we interacted with them by touch and pointing, that was somehow a better interface to a machine. And yet now we go back to this, and as you say, it is so seductive that we're quite happy to sit with a keyboard typing words and spelling them wrong and getting responses back. You're right, it's amazing how seductive it is.
Well, it's amazing. It says something so profound about people, about us, about human nature. And in the book, I do mention my favorite story. I mean, I have a whole section about sort of myths, because it's an important thing to say, and maybe we should talk about it some more. But this whole idea of, why do people create machines? And there is a school of thought that it's to do with conflict and war, and classically, people wanted, tribes would fight. But at the same time, as the guns were created, and at the same time, almost, there's this other strand going, which is kind of art and people kind of creating things to make themselves feel better. And of course, the Descartes story, which is 17th century, about 1640, him creating this mechanical doll because he lost his daughter. And then on and on. I like talking about Frankenstein. Of course, there'll be the new film in a minute, because Mary Shelley created the book, the notion of creating life, when she'd lost a baby as well. So again, like Descartes, it's a sort of grieving parent thing. And with it, and there's loads of other stories at the same time, Hoffman, Sandman, about Olympia, and so on. So the idea of some kind of mechanical creation which responds to our desire to be loved and to have this kind of to make up for the pain of a loss is been there throughout our history. And yes, I didn't write about it in the book, but I did go last week to see Agnieszka Holland's premiere of her new film. Agnieszka Holland is the filmmaker. I also have written about her, and that book is in production, so hopefully it will appear soon. But so that particular piece of work about Franz Kafka is so interesting when you think about AI at the same time, because he was a very lonely person, did not fit in well in the world. Language was a massive thing because he was kind of German, but Jewish, Yiddish. Then they lived in Prague and they spoke in Czech, and the film is like that as well. And I think the film will be controversial because it's not an easy piece of work to watch either. But it's what becomes very clear is that his encounters with fellow humans were pretty difficult in terms of the actual encounter, seeing people. So he is famous for his astonishing letter writing kind of output, which is almost as important as his other very short stories, which are all about the sense of not belonging, of sense of being anxious, being scared, that the machinery of the society and structures, and then they actually deploy actual machines to torture people and so on. It's really, really scary, some of it, but you could see how it there is a connection between that world created by Kafka and that world created by Holland and where we are today. I mean, what do you think?
Yes, I think as we've been scanning through developments this week, one of the things that's come across to me, looking for interesting things around AI, has been the threads. It's always pushing towards monetization, control power is always, what can we use this for to reinforce the dominant discourses, dominant ideology? No, I'm not a pessimist, and I'm not too paranoid, but I see a lot of good in all of this, but it can be quite depressing in some ways, for me anyway, to think of something which is of this kind of most romantic, seductive thing that is emerging. The first thing we want to do is, how can we use it to control people? How can we use it to make money? How can we use it to reinforce the dominant economic systems and its impact on geopolitics? I find, disappointing.
Yes, and difficult to think about and make sense of. But Pete, you've written your first Substack this week.
I have written, yes.
So maybe you could tell us about it.
Okay, yes. Having read yours and thinking I really ought to get around to doing something of my own, I finally have. And of course, with complete transparency, I have to say it's a collaboration between me and ChatGPT-5. But what I've done is I was forever reading about AI and forever coming across references to and quotes from Geoffrey Hinton. Geoffrey Hinton is a very important figure in the development of the history of AI, because he's a computer scientist who developed a method of training. In fact, the fundamental way in which large language models are now trained is down to Geoffrey Hinton. So let's fully recognise his contribution to the field. However, that's not quite how he comes across now, because he worked for Google and he resigned. And somehow along the way, I haven't really tracked it back to a singularity, an origin point, but he is always referred to, and every time you see him, referenced in the media as the godfather of AI. And that is so prevalent that I decided to have a little bit of a look into that. And because of some part of my background is in discourse analysis, I wanted to go down the Fairclough and Foucault route of looking at critical discourse analysis and what the way in which things are expressed say about power relationships. And so, yes, the Substack is all on that. It just looks at the way in which he kind of creates a bit of an apocalyptic view with references to climate change. The threat from AI is worse than climate change, or perhaps, to be fair to him, more immediate than climate change, which, does raise the stakes, given that man-made climate change, we're all going to die. To put AI threats above that is quite serious. So I pick out, there are a few examples in there, and try and tie it back to some of this ideology, as I was just mentioning, around the economics of it and the power. So I would recommend a read of that, and I'll post links to it.
Yeah, exactly. So this time, please post links to mine, as always, yes, I hope. Yes. Yes. But also yours. And I found it very interesting reading it, that you kind of mention, Godfather, like in Mafia and all these famous films, at which it is interesting when you've said it. Why did they say that? And it's sort of, there is something that suggests that he's very powerful, even though maybe he isn't quite so much. Although I think he has got soft power and influence even today. I mean, for me, I like some of the things he says, which are about ethics and teaching AI to care. And I think that's important. We have invited Geoffrey Hinton to come onto our podcast, but so far he says he's too busy. But we remain optimistic.
Well, he might not now if he reads my Substack.
It was very clever. He says we need to teach these machines, we need to teach AI to be maternal. It's another way of saying it, but it is saying, there needs to be in the architecture.
Let me just backpedal completely, because my concern is actually not so much with what Geoffrey has to say per se. It's the way in which he's been packaged, is packaged by others for their purposes. So as ever, it's with discourse. It's not about Geoffrey Hinton directly. I take no view about him as a person. I'm sure he's a very nice chap, but the way he's been taken up and used by others who do have an agenda is really my point.
Well, he seems to be delightful, and for myself, I like at least some of the things he has to say. But on this particular occasion, so yes, now we're encouraging you to read our writings, Substacks. So far, I have actually got some stuff written in free associations, which I don't think we mentioned.
Yes.
But we will be talking about my book, which is some time away from being published, a few months. And meanwhile, we will keep talking, and hopefully we'll have another interesting guest soon.
Yes, that will be good. The thing about AI is there will always be something to talk about. So I don't see us running out of anything anytime soon.
Well, lovely. Well, very good to see you. And thank you to everybody. And
yes,
we keep going and keep developing our relationships with AI responsibly.
Yes, and anyone who's picking up any of our material on social media or YouTube or Spotify, and we always welcome comments and feedback on any of this stuff, because a lot of these questions are very open and we're interested to know what people think. Till the next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.